So what do you do when your childhood hero is also your childhood villain? All this and more in this week's episode of the podcast.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Dustin Riechmann story. This week, Dustin's going to share his personal journey from poverty, having his father as his childhood hero, but also his greatest villain. And then he talks about how he got into school, he got into trouble, he got brought back to school, and the blessing that his grandmother and grandfather was, how he and his mom survived while his mom and dad went through a divorce, how they came back together, and then how he went from an engineer to an entrepreneur, and how you can too. So all this and much, much more in this episode of the podcast, the Dustin Riechmann story. Now, keep in mind three things. Number one, we love you. If you need anything, please reach out to us and let us know. Two, if this podcast helped you, please share with your friends and family, put it on social media. If you think the topic's going to help people, share it. Let's just share the love for free and help as many people as we can. Number three, the first half of this episode is more of Dustin's story. The second 45 minutes is his application and answering questions like, hey, if you're a business owner, or how do you become an entrepreneur? And then once you are a business owner or entrepreneur, how do you grow an email list? How do you recommend digital marketing? And a whole bunch of practical questions that can help you grow. So like our slogan says, don't just listen to great content, but do it. Repeat it each day so you can have a great life in this world, and more importantly, in eternity to come. So at this time, let's welcome our friend, Dustin Riechmann. Hey, Dustin, how are you today, brother?
Doing awesome, David. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited for our episode. I was just telling our listeners all about you. So at this time, man, let's just jump right into your story. Where were you born? What was your upbringing life? You know, mom, dad, brothers, sisters. Where did Dustin's life start?
Absolutely. So it all started in a town called Jerseyville, Illinois. And this town comes up a few times in my story. It's a farm town, county seat out in rural Illinois, about an hour and a half or so from St. Louis, Missouri. And actually, I've never lived more than an hour from my hometown. I live in a bedroom community of St. Louis now, with where we have a university. That's where I went to school. So yeah, so my upbringing was very chaotic. My dad was kind of my hero and my villain, sometimes in the same day. He was an alcoholic and quite abusive, especially to my mom, but also to my half brother, who was his stepson. He was a literal redheaded stepchild who was 6 years older than me. And so, yeah, we grew up with a lot of chaos, a lot of, I've had vivid memories of him like throwing my mom across an open stove, like our oven in the winter. We would use our oven to help heat the home, and she actually fractured her back. She had a nervous breakdown at one point and I had to go live with my grandparents for a while. Yeah, there's a lot there in my early years, and we can definitely talk about any of that we'd like to do. But I will give him credit in that there is a redemption to that story later in life. He did get clean eventually, and my parents, pretty fun fact, they were married twice, and so they got married, got divorced, he got clean and sober, and then got married again when I was in college. And my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and myself were the attendants at my parents' second wedding. So we kind of got to see a full spectrum. He passed away about 9 years ago, I guess. At this point, he was much older than my mom. He was 18 years older than my mom, and that was part of the dynamic there. She had her own father issues and apparently sought that out in her husband. And yeah, so that's a lot of how I would relay my relationship with my dad. On the kind of negative side. On the positive side, he was a union laborer, very strong, he's a 6'5", 215 guy. So I really looked up to him from that standpoint. And he was huge into outdoors and hunting, especially raccoon hunting for fur, which is something that's kind of what used to be big around here. And so most of my childhood, I remember being out at night in the woods, chasing raccoons and shooting 22 rifles with him. And then those are the good nights. And then the bad nights were when he would go out on a bender and not come home, or he would come home and we'd have to flee the house and escape to my grandma's or to a woman's shelter or whatever was available at that time.
And then was it just you and your step brother?
Yeah. So me and my half brother. So we
And your
share a
half-brother.
mom, different dad. And then I have another half brother who is much older. So my dad had a son without my mom in a previous marriage. My mom had got pregnant in high school with my half brother who I lived with. He was 6 years older than me. So he left when I was 11. He left high school early and went to the Marine Corps just to escape the house, I think, more than anything. And so, yeah, he's still in the area, and I still keep in touch with him. So I have two half brothers, basically.
And when you were growing up, because you were born into that type of family, did you know, like, okay, the other families around us aren't like that? Or were you in a neighborhood where everybody was in the same boat? Did it seem kind of quote unquote normal?
I knew from school that it definitely wasn't normal. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. So we lived about 10 miles from the nearest gas station. Yeah. So again, it's like this dichotomy of good and bad. Like I have a huge appreciation for the outdoors. I spend most of my time outside when I can. Spent all my childhood climbing trees and taking guns out and shooting them recreationally and fishing. And we talk about my grandpa, but I had a really good release with my grandpa who lived in town. But yeah, as far as my peer-to-peer stuff, I had friends at school, but I didn't really have any friends at home. So I would essentially go out by myself most of the time, or sometimes my brother and I would, play basketball. But again, he was 6 years older than me, so we'd fight and wrestle, but we didn't do a lot of other things recreationally together. But yeah, my mom and dad were quite characters. I remember as a child, they were growing marijuana on our farm, and they smoked it. Or not my farm, at our house on the neighbor's farm, who wasn't their property. And I remember numerous times saying they got a call from someone in town that the sheriff was coming out there, and I had to go help them hide the pot plants. So yeah, kind of wild. I mean, they were never violent. They never sold it or anything. It was like they were using it recreationally, but they grew their own. I guess nowadays it'd be considered cool, but back then it was illegal. So.
Yeah, it was a whole different world. Once the government figured out how to monetize and control the supply, it became the wonder drug, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. Okay, so now with that, so your mom, like you said, she had daddy issues. She married a guy who's 18 years older, and he was your hero and your villain all at the same time. You're being raised, and when did your parents split at that point in your life? How old
So
were you then?
they split when I was a freshman in high school. So
Okay.
yeah, we had lived in that one house for like 12 years. We moved to a very urban area where I, got arrested, got my ear pierced. This is all when I was 11, actually. I was 11 years old in sixth grade. So I got in a lot of fights and was vandalizing. And, that was my rebellious time. Luckily, they took me out of that environment. We moved back to a different part near Jerseyville, in a different part of the country. And so it was around that time that second move, shortly after that second move, that they got divorced. So then my dad moved out when I was a freshman. And like I said, they got remarried. I was a freshman in college. So it was about 4 or 5 years there where they were separated. And I didn't realize they had actually started dating again. And I get this call saying, hey, we're going to get married on the courthouse steps next week or something. Can you and Bethany, my now wife, be there with us? And I'm like, holy moly. I knew they'd been talking, but I didn't realize it was that serious. And yeah, so the rest of their life was somewhat normal. He had his issues, and he ultimately ended up with dementia and had a lot of health issues later in life. But he had some good years there where he was sober and pretty healthy.
And so you were a little bit more rebellious than normal. You said when you were 11, you got into some trouble.
Yeah, I would say so. It was really the change of environment, I feel like, that triggered it. Actually, I thought a lot about this. I wrote a whole essay when I got a full scholarship to college, and part of that process was writing this introspective essay. And it was really, for me, as like this change of environment. Like all I had known was isolation, being out in the country. I had all my frustrations I'd go have outlets out in the country, and then we moved into this town where we lived in subsidized housing and among a bunch of other kids in low, poverty. We'd always been impoverished. I was always on free lunches and all that stuff and food stamps. But I was put into an environment now where I had people to hang out with, and my parents didn't give me any boundaries, right? So I'm literally, now I think about it, I have a child who just finished up sixth grade today, and I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. But I think of my child who's that age, like I can't imagine what they were thinking. Like I was out till midnight with these kids running around. Of course I'm gonna get in trouble. I was smoking cigarettes. They were having me drink like little airline things of alcohol, and I was 11 years old. That seems insane now to think about, but I was only there for a year. And so that after that year, I got back, I felt like into my better environment. And, I didn't have access to that stuff, and it's never been an issue since. So I've always been a straight A student, even during that sixth grade year. But, I got taken to the police station a couple different times for stupid stuff, and just got into the wrong crowd. So I'm super thankful I was extracted from that, because I really feel like I would have easily went down a path of teenage pregnancy, drugs, or something if I would have stayed in that environment.
And then once you got back to your town and your mom at that point still separated from your father, they get divorced. What was that like? Your brother, you said, is already out of the house. He joined the
He was
Marines.
out of the house at that point.
So you're pretty much the only child, you and your mom.
Yeah.
What was that like at that point? What were you?
It was tough, because she kind of was ready to sow her oats, right? She had met my dad when she was 22 and had been abused, and all this stuff had been going on for 15 years probably, because I was 14. So yeah, there's a lot of, I don't like blame her at all for this, but there were a lot of nights where I was left alone, and so I'd be just at the house by myself, or she might bring a guy home, and it was a very small house. So I knew when that happened, I would sometimes have to go up to the bar, which was within walking distance of her house, and ask her to come home, and things like that. So she went through a spell of maybe a year there where she was, being selfish, and just like, I'm sure taking a deep exhale from all the pain she had been through, and was just doing her own thing, never trying to neglect me. But, in some ways I definitely felt that way.
Yeah. And then, so where does your life go from there? You start getting to the point of graduation, you had straight A's, and you mentioned you wrote an essay to get a scholarship.
Yeah.
So where did you go from there?
Yeah, before we leave the childhood, the one really key figure that I feel like saved me in many ways from making some really bad choices, or just who inspired me, was my grandfather. So he was actually my mom's stepdad. So not even by blood relation, but very consistently as a child, on Sundays, my parents would drop us off at my grandparents'. We'd stay there all day, and then they'd pick us up in the evening. I don't know what they were doing while we were there, but I have my thoughts now. But so very often, almost every Sunday, I'd go fishing with my grandpa if it wasn't too cold out, or my grandma would take me out on country roads, and we'd pick up like beer cans, and we'd sell the aluminum so I could have some money to spend. So it kind of started my entrepreneurial journey in some ways. But my grandpa was very much a strong father figure for me, and he passed away when I was in high school. So, but a lot of stability, I would say, during my young years was from him. And I think part of that move away into that more urban environment, I lost contact with him. I didn't have any way to go see him every weekend any longer, because we were much further away. And yeah, I think that's part of that. In hindsight, that's where some of that rebellion came up. So anyway, giving him his just credit. He's a military veteran, World War II, injured in the war. Like, yeah, there's so much I wish I would have talked to him about that I wasn't mature enough to realize at the time what a gift he was. But yeah, so after high school, one thing that happened in high school was I started dating this girl when I was 16 and she was 15, and we never broke up. So she's been my wife for 20 years now. So we were high school sweethearts. Yeah, and in meeting her family. So growing up, I had no faith background. I was never baptized. I went to a few random churches with people from time to time when they would invite me. One of our neighbors at one point was Mormon, so I went to some of their social activities. But yeah, but her parents were Catholic and practicing Catholic, devout Catholics. And her brother was actually in my grade, and we were friends. And then she was 1 year younger. So as I started hanging around her more and hanging around her family a lot, like, they were a huge influence. And I give them a lot of credit for me valuing the idea of marriage and like having a model for what that looks like. Because I would say, if you asked me when I was 15, I had no desire to ever be married. I thought it was a trap. I thought it was like, look what it did to my mom. Like, if she wouldn't have been married to this guy, she wouldn't have had to endure all this stuff. So what's the point? And I also had no faith life, so I had no basis to understand why people would value that. So I'd say those last couple of years of high school, being around my wife's family, was a huge influence on me. I went away to college. I say I went away. It was like an hour away, but I did move on campus. So I was definitely not back home. My wife was still in her senior year of high school. So most weekends were spent going back and dating her. But I had a very, very enriching freshman year of college. So I mentioned the scholarship. It was not, I had needs-based stuff and Pell Grants and stuff because of our income level, but I was a good student. I did really well in the ACT, very strong in math and science. And so I was one of 20 students in my class of, I don't know, however many people, 5,000 or something. I was one of 20 people at this university. Well, at the time it was called a Chancellor's Scholarship. So it was a full ride scholarship completely, which was a complete blessing. I never knew if I'd go to college. Like I knew I had this desire and I had the aptitude, but I had no idea how I would afford it. So this was a huge blessing that I even applied to this college. I was going to apply to a different school. I found out my wife had a desire to go to this school. And I said, well, what the heck? They didn't really have a strong engineering program at the time, but I'll apply. Turned out they were really trying to bolster their engineering program. They saw me as a great candidate, and that really helped. So as fate had it, it ended up in a great school. And that freshman year was very tied into that Chancellor Scholarship because they basically made us peers. Those 20 students lived near each other. We had a lot of special classes together, like seminar level classes. I was in, like honors level classes with some of these guys. I found out quickly that they had a much better high school education than I did. I'm jumping into university calculus and chemistry and stuff that on my transcript looked like it should be qualified, but I really wasn't. So freshman year was a huge wake-up call academically, how rigorous it was. I had 8 a.m., 5-day-a-week classes of calculus or chemistry. But, we had a good social time. I found in high school, I never went to a bunch of parties. I always had this huge fear that the first time I drink alcohol outside of when I was 11, first time I really drink alcohol though consciously, that I might become my dad, like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. He was very much a split personality with and without alcohol. Luckily, I found that wasn't the case. And so socially in high school, most of my evenings and the weekends would be either working or going on a date with Bethany, or I'd be at my friend's house. We'd fish and have beers and stuff like that. But in college, you're exposed to much more of those opportunities. But I still found that peer group they kind of held me in check, and I never really partied my way through school. I always had a good social time and we did things. But I guess I say all that to say I was very blessed to land in this group of 20 people. I think all but my brother, so I think all but one of my groomsmen when I ultimately got married were from that group. Like it was a very tight-knit group. So that was my freshman year.
And before you go on, just so people know, we have listeners from all over the world. When you go to university, and especially within America, you have different tracks of study, which most countries have. But the engineering, the nursing programs, you are with like the same group of people, 8 to 5 every day, labs at night. I mean, was that your experience? Like,
it was, although so under the Chancellor Scholar umbrella, I would say like out of the 20, like 5 of us were in engineering. There was every major was represented, like liberal arts, nursing, whatever.
Okay.
So I was in there with actually a very diverse group, racially, interest level, and what we were doing in school. But you're right. I kind of had like the engineering group that I was forced to be around, and I had the Chancellor Scholar group. And then, and ironically, in hindsight, the intersection of those, all 3 of my roommates throughout the rest of college were both engineers and Chancellor Scholars, different field of engineering. So we actually didn't share that many classes, but it is kind of funny to think about. But it gave me an identity. Like I knew growing up, I loved the idea of construction, probably because my dad had worked on these really major projects in our region, and I geeked out on like documentaries about those kind of projects. So I didn't even know what an engineer did when I was in high school, but they kind of said, hey, you have this aptitude, why don't you try it? And it turned out to be a really, really good path for me. And so my freshman year, the other major thing that happened was like this is where I was going with the drinking. One late night, 2 a.m, dorm room thing. We're just sitting around, we played video games, we're talking, someone's playing guitar, we were drinking beers. We got into this like philosophical debate about religion. And I just felt this like intense need to defend like Christianity and Jesus Christ and this stuff. And I'd been around some of it with Bethany's parents. I'd been to the Catholic mass some, but I didn't have a full appreciation yet. But really that night, I realized it was something important to me. I ultimately entered the program, the RCIA, to enter into the Catholic Church. Bethany became my sponsor. And this was all before we had, decided we were for sure getting married or anything. We weren't engaged. So she was my sponsor. And so this was also when I was like 19 years old. I entered the church. So that was a major change in my life. I started becoming a regular churchgoer, and part of that was fleshed out. Like I didn't have a political identity. I didn't have a faith identity. I didn't even understand like what kind of career I might want But that freshman year of my college, like all this intense stuff happened because I was in this group and in these like really thought-provoking classes with the best professors on campus who made us debate some of these topics and take positions and defend them. And that was really instrumental for me and my future and how I would even apply my engineering degree. So yeah, the rest of college was fairly normal, I would say. Right after, like a week after I graduated with my undergrad, Bethany and I got married. So we were pretty young, but we've been together a long time. So I was 21, she was 20 when we got married. So she was finishing up school and I was starting my engineering career at that point. And yeah, I mean, from there, I ultimately ended up working full-time engineering consulting. And then I was doing night classes and earned my master's degree in traffic engineering, which is a specialty I worked in.
And what was your undergrad in? Mechanical, electrical?
Civil, yeah, civil engineering. Yep. Yep. So very much in line. My dad worked on roads, bridges, dams. And so in college, I also worked for the Corps of Engineers as an intern and worked on locking dams and big dams at lakes. Like got to go inside of them and measure performance and make sure things were structurally sound. So yeah, it was a pretty cool experience in college. Yeah. So from there, the short version of had an engineering career for 18 years. During that time, I had a lot of side hustles and built online businesses and several brands. I still have three businesses I help run right now. So we can talk about any of that you'd like to jump into. But yeah, so we got married when I was 21. I had our first child when I was 25. And he's now 17 years old. So that gives you an idea of where I'm at in life. And like I mentioned earlier, I have 3 kids right now, 17, 15, and 12.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, I mean, when you're going out of college and you got married, you started having kids, that's a full load. And yet you still were looking for other avenues to have a side hustle. Was
Yeah.
that a necessity? Like, I need more money? Or did you just have that inner drive? I want to do more. Did you have a passion or love? What led to those side hustles?
I think it was all of the above. I mean, we made some of those typical mistakes. I didn't know anything about money, or like how to handle money. I grew up with no money. So we, even having a decent salary, we definitely overspent that on things, just not like crazy stuff, but like furniture loans. And we bought a house pretty early on. That was a pretty big jump for us. Auto loans. So at some point we were like $60,000 in debt, and that wasn't student loans. I didn't have any student loans. My wife had some, but we paid those off. So kind of had a wake up call at some point, probably about 5 years into our marriage. It was like, this is not sustainable. This is dumb. Like I make so much more than my parents ever made, and we're negative, like we're ever have a negative net worth. So we found Dave Ramsey and got into like passionate about paying off our debt. So it was really, I think it was in part that urgency of like, if I could earn some more income here, it would really help. And I later realized what I was really doing in most cases is scratching like a really deep entrepreneurial itch that I had that I didn't know how to name. I didn't realize it was even an option for me. I was so dang grateful to be given the opportunity to have an engineering education that was a full scholarship, and then my employer paid for my master's degree. So I was like, man, like that's my identity, and like how ungrateful would I be to give that up? So I hung on for, I'd say 8 years longer than I really wanted to in that career. But yeah, so I did all kinds of crazy stuff for side money. Like I was buying golf clubs back in the day, it was Craigslist and eBay, right? So I'd buy stuff on Craigslist locally, shine them up. I got really good at selling on eBay, and I'd resell them for more than I bought them for. And we were, making $1,500 extra a month doing that and paying off debt, and had my kids involved, my very small kids at that time, and had a lot of fun with it, but didn't realize now I'd probably be killed in like the first month, like going to these people's garages in St. Louis, like off of Craigslist. But, so I did some fairly creative things like that were pretty laborious. But the very first brand we created is Engaged Marriage, which anyone seeing the video can see. I have the sign behind me. So that was in 2009, and so I started my engineering career in 2001. So it was about 8 years in that was like the first legitimate brand, and that grew out actually of marriage and ministry. So something that's been very constant in my adult life is marriage ministry. So even we were only a few years into our marriage. I think we just had our first child, and friends from our diocese asked us to attend a marriage retreat. We thought we were going there to participate, and we did, but really we were going there to be trained to help give in the future, because they saw that we, were passionate and we could talk and those sort of things. So for several years, we were doing marriage ministry through the church. And I just felt this calling. I was reading a book on vacation. Actually, it was called No More Dreaded Mondays by Dan Miller. And it was just talking about how you're not just one thing, right? Like you have this ability to be creative. And I was like, that's what I need, a creative outlet. So Engaged Marriage was basically me writing blogs back in the day, in the heyday of blogging, started in 2009, about our life and about the lessons we're learning and these things that we're experiencing at marriage retreats. And I was reading a lot of books about marriage and parenting. And obviously I was trying to overcome my own childhood. In hindsight, I wanted to be a really good dad, a really good husband, and it's not easy. And I was figuring it out. So Engaged Marriage kind of really grew out of that experience. It was intended just to be a place to chronicle our life and our experiences, but I started getting a lot of traction pretty quickly. And I started realizing that I was quite good at collaborating with other online business people. And I was kind of always the one coming up with creative ways to do projects together and spread our messages together and change our brand. So yeah, so 2012, I wrote a book called 15-Minute Marriage Makeover. It's kind of the engineer's approach to having a great married life. And it was quite popular, and we did speaking. And then in 2015 is when I decided I really need to get out of engineering. I have something here with Engaged Marriage, it's making money. We had some great courses and a membership site and this book. So I dove really deep into digital marketing at that time. I was taking time off of work to go down to conferences and learn digital marketing and get certifications and things like that. So that was really pivotal because Engaged Marriage grew, and I developed all these skills over those years, and people started hiring me as a marketing consultant. Meanwhile, I'm still working like 50 hours a week in engineering. I'm a manager at this point at an engineering firm, managing about $4 million of projects and 18 people. But I was also growing the side business with the marketing. And so finally in 2017, something hit me over the summer, and I had this, I feel like it was really like an epiphany, like, oh my gosh, like I'm treating this engineering thing like if I ever leave it, it's like this permanent decision. I'm leaving my whole identity behind. And it's like, you're a dumbass. Like, why are you putting all that pressure on this decision? Why don't you just quit, and then you could always go back, because you're good at it. You're not getting fired, or blacklisted from the industry. So I finally decided, I worked really hard the second half of 2017, built up a war chest, and then quit engineering the first day of 2018. Still did some contract work here and there, but basically at that point I was doing Engaged Marriage, and I was basically doing gigs, freelance marketing, mostly for local brick and mortar people. So like my dentist became my best client, and I had a real estate broker friend who was a client, a restaurant owner. So it's kind of random, but I was learning a lot about marketing by working with all these different people, and they gave me enough income that I replaced my engineering income. Because in the course of life, from the time we had our third kid on, my wife actually started to stay at home. So yeah, so there was a lot of pressure on that decision. Like I gave up healthcare, I gave up a really good salary. And again, she stayed at home. She put her faith in me and allowed me, and said she believed me. She supported my decision if it's what I really felt like I needed to do. And it was like one of the best decisions I've ever made. So that was a big transition point in my life, going from that identity of engineer. I still introduce myself as an engineer for people when people ask me, because it's like, it infers that I'm intelligent or something. Like there's some identity still there that I have a hard time saying I'm not. So.
Yeah. And a lot of times too is you had so much going on, and you're constantly moving forward and constantly, in a good way, adapting and evolving to your surroundings and seizing opportunity. You had that epiphany moment where you're like, oh, I can leave. It's okay. Right. It's okay.
No, I don't physically have golden handcuffs. It might feel like it, but yeah.
Yeah. It's like an elephant on a rope. Do you ever hear, if people haven't heard that, elephants, when they're like baby elephants, they literally put a little rope and a nail, knock them into the ground, and the elephant can't pull off. A year later, they're like a ton in weight. They could sneeze and break the rope,
right.
But they don't even try. They're just conditioned not to pull. So That's how we get sometimes in life. You were told you're an engineer and you work for an engineer, and you're an engineer. That's it.
Right.
So talk to the listeners. Let's start. And okay, so between your birth and this point in life, is there anything significant we missed before I start asking questions and we move forward? Anything significant you can think of?
Boy, I feel like I went off on numerous significant tangents between the people in my life, my faith life, ministry, getting into entrepreneurship. So no, nothing's coming to mind that we missed.
Okay. So now looking at the opportunities, you think differently and you act. And those are two things we all need to do. You know, the Bible says the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. Some
Yeah.
people read that and they don't even know what it means. It means talk's cheap. You got to
Right.
do, right? That's what
Yeah.
it means. Talk's cheap. So you have an analytical mind, which usually doesn't tend to entrepreneurship. So how do you look at your surroundings that helped you to see the opportunity, to analyze if it's a good risk, and then to take it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that I've definitely feel is developed through practice and repetition and modeling. So I am an engineer. I am analytical. I am left-brained. But it's funny, like you look at my ACT scores, math and science were the lowest. Actually, I had really high reading and English. Like, so I've always been able to communicate well and write well persuasively. So that kind of lended itself to marketing in particular. But yeah, but I also see the world in systems, and I see opportunities constantly. So like if there's one thing I would critique myself on as an adult, it's like trying too many things all the time. I always have too much going on because I have just see opportunities everywhere. So and I really do think that's a lot of that comes from an engineering training where everything is viewed through the lens of something being a problem or a potential problem, and then reverse, it's called reverse engineering for a reason, coming up with an action plan to address that issue. That mindset, it can be really healthy, it can be really destructive. The early years of our marriage, we had issues often because I was always trying to solve problems that my wife didn't want me to solve, right? I was not a good listener. I was a great instructor and like, "Hey, let's fix this issue," and all she really needed was to be heard. But in the business world, like people pay to get their problem solved, and so that I realized pretty quickly I could add value just with the way I approach problems. So yeah, if someone's listening and they're like, how do you ever see opportunities? Like, get coached, be around people who like think this way. Look, like when you're at the supermarket next time, look around and try to see problems, see things that can be improved, and you'll come up with creative things. Like, so for me, it kind of started out of necessity with the golf. So I'll give you two examples real quick for how this has developed in me before I ever could call it anything or recognize it as entrepreneurial. So we're in debt. I really wanted some new golf clubs, but we're in debt and I can't justify spending money on golf clubs. So I figured what I'll do is I'll order a couple different drivers off eBay, and then I'll test them out and then I'll resell them, right? I'll get my money back. And I did that, except when I resold them, I wrote persuasively and I took really good photos and they sold for more than I bought them. So then that was the genesis of this idea. And then I realized that like buying from eBay and selling back on eBay, you can't get a big spread because it's the same market. And also there's shipping and it's expensive. So that's where this idea of like, what if I get really good at understanding the value of certain brands of golf clubs, and then I can buy them locally through Craigslist. People don't know what they're worth, and and I can negotiate and all that. And so that's where I became an entrepreneur really at that moment, right? And that was even before engaged marriage. And then engaged marriage was a direct application of trying to grow a ministry that eventually became a business. And then shortly after that, you asked about significant things in life. I would say I got challenged to be have you heard of Tough Mudder? Like these obstacle course. Yeah. So my brother-in-law, who's much younger than me, had challenged me, "Hey, you want to be on our team?" And I'm like, "Sure." Turns out he's on there with all these Air Force people, and they're all super fit. And I had ran a mile since high school. So I'm like, oh crap. So I started running and running and running. My wife has always been a great runner. And I was to prepare for Tough Mudder. Did that, realized I love these like big challenging things. But what also happened is I got shin splints, like really bad shin splints, which if people aren't familiar with that, you run when you're not in shape, you will get like intense pain along the tendons in your lower legs. It's debilitating. And so I searching all over YouTube and trying to figure out how the heck to get rid of shin splints. And I kind of took a combination of different things, like some icing, some stretching, some myofascial stuff, like foam rolling. And I realized that like this routine really helped me. And then I, for some reason, recorded it one day, like in my living room, and put it on YouTube. I think I put on my engaged marriage channel, just like some content, and it like went viral. And all these people are commenting like, "Where'd you buy the foam roller? How much is where'd you get these gel packs for the ice?" And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to put together a shin splints treatment kit. So I did that. So I realized that like I could buy these gel packs from the manufacturer as a wholesaler. They didn't know who I was. I just buy a bunch of them, and I'd buy foam rollers the same way. And then my kids would assemble these boxes in my garage, and I was paying them to do that. And so they got involved, and they see entrepreneurially now too. And then for like 2 years, we sold these boxes online. I'd say it cost us $18 of stuff probably in the box, and we were selling them for $50. Zero marketing. I just had this one video that everyone found. Again, I saw an opportunity. Like I had shin splints, I fixed them. And then I was like, I'm going to make a video. I had no intention of ever doing anything other than like helping my listeners who were maybe fat and trying to run for the first time. But then boom, I saw the opportunity. And like within a week I had a business, I had names, I had a store. Like I spun up a store online and to do the checkouts. So is that natural? Is that innate? I don't know. I'm sure some of it is, right? I told you, like going back as a kid, I always loved money, and because I never had it, and I always I always craved like not even like affluence, but security, right? Like I want to have enough money. So like when my grandma would take me out, we'd spend a Sunday afternoon and we'd pick up these beer cans and along these gravel roads, and she would save them up, and she would always let me have all the money. And like now I realize how special that was, because they live in a trailer, and so did we. Like they didn't have any money either, but she really helped support this idea of like you work hard and you can go out and you can like get money in exchange for that. So I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a tangent. Maybe people find some interest in like, wow, who would have thought getting shin splints could turn into a 5-figure a year business, which it did with those kits. They're on Amazon. I actually wrote a Kindle book about it, and the Kindle book was like a lead in to get people to buy the kits. So it kind of evolved over time, and I've gotten pretty skilled at marketing and strategy, and that's a lot of what I do for other companies at this point. But that was the genesis, was golf clubs and shin splints.
Yeah, and I think if you're listening to Dustin, if you have something that frustrates you,
Yeah.
and you need to find a solution, that's something that other people are looking for as well.
Or if you've overcome a problem, or you've had a life experience. There's no coincidence that Engaged Marriage was my first major brand.
Yeah, exactly.
I went from the guy who, like, if you go to our About page, it's like the guy who hates marriage meets the family who would change it all or something, right? And it's that legitimate story of a broken kid who met my now wife, and whose parents inspired me so much that I not only joined the church, but I became a marriage minister. Right? And yeah, think about that. Yeah, it's a great point. Reflect on your own life. If you don't think you're entrepreneurial, you don't have to be, and maybe you don't want to be. But if you're looking for those kind of business ideas, what's a current pain? What's a past pain you got over? What's something from your background? And a lot of times there's intersections of like those problems and like your skill sets, and then people will definitely pay money for the combination of those things.
Yeah. And I think what's it's super interesting, and it's heartwarming, not to use like a cheesy Hallmark term, but like your grandmother and you would spend time together.
Yeah.
But she was instilling in you good work ethic and value. And then you get older, and the first thing you do is, it comes naturally, you put your kids to work, and you're teaching them these values and these techniques, and they don't even know they're learning. And I don't know, they might have complained if they're normal kids, but like they might have loved it, but who knows? But either way, you're continuing this trend. And I think for our listeners, myself, a big takeaway here is, I think all of us have these ideas, but you have to act on it.
Yeah.
And what Dustin did is he made a habit of acting on it. And then once you start moving, God blesses. And it just snowballs and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but you have to take action each step. So like you said, you got shin splints, you started looking, you put the video, then people start asking, so you start selling products, then you start writing a book, and you learn marketing, and now you use this in other areas of your life. So
Right.
I think the key is just beautiful, that you're just doing your best at that moment and moving forward. And one thing I find really awesome is that a lot of us, the saying tries to work in our heads, oh, you can't do that, or nobody needs that, or you're not good enough to do that, somebody else will do that. Did you hear those evil voices, or did you not even hear it because how you were wired? Your grandmother told you be productive, you wanted to break free from poverty, or did you have the demons in your head trying to slow you down, or did you just let's do it?
No, I don't think there's a lot of naysayers. they say you learn through failure. I've done a lot of things I shouldn't have done in hindsight because because of the opportunity costs. I've never had like a true business failure where it's like people would point at me and laugh, because a lot of these things were very small. They were kind of happening in my basement, and people didn't even know about it at all unless I would start writing about it like on Engaged Marriage, because it was a strategy for other couples to get out of debt, that sort of thing. But no, I think for me, it's the thing that held me back the most, and rightfully so, was my wife saying things like, "Hey, you work 80 hours a week. Like, you want to hang out with me tonight?" And that was, so I talked earlier about not being a good communicator with her, and that caused a lot of issues. And then my business drive, while can be positive, you can overdo those things. And I really failed at boundaries for several years of our marriage when it came to how I use my time. So I still have a lot of stuff going on, and we'll talk about the current businesses and stuff, but I'm quite rigid about boundaries. So I work at home. I'm in my home office. There's magic to that door though, and this laptop doesn't come out of this room. And it's not to say I don't work some nights and things like that, but I started to realize like I've got to have some better boundaries. And so I would say the naysayers, if they was really my wife. My kids might have felt that way, but it didn't verbalize it. But she would rightfully so, again, she would rein me in from time to time, like, it's getting a little out of control again. You're right. Okay. And then now we're going to go to bed at the same time, watch a movie, whatever, like, and I'm going to turn this stuff off, because when you're a driven person and you're entrepreneurial and you see an opportunity, it's real easy to like not get out of your desk chair and just work, way too much. And I definitely fell into that trap numerous times.
So then now you got 3 kids, a wife. She sounds like she's a great wife. She's helped iron sharpeneth iron. So the man accountant's a friend, a good Proverbs 31 wife helping you stay balanced.
She is that and more. Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So when you're doing this, you decide to take this step and go into marketing full time. And you said you had a dentist, a real estate agent, and there was a restaurant. Were your first 3?
Yep.
And
And
now,
all 3 were literally just by talking about it. I was still an engineer. I'm like literally my dent. This is something I tell business people all the time. It's like, don't be shy about what you do. You have no idea when you're talking to someone if them or a friend may need what you do. And I'm like, was literally in my dentist chair. We were kind of friends and known him for a while. And so he said one day I was getting a cleaning or something. He's like, "How are things going, Dustin?" I'm like, "Oh, good. I'm actually pretty excited. I'm still doing the engineering thing, but I'm looking to transition out. I'm doing a lot of marketing now, And he said, "What kind of marketing?" And we should talk. And then, yeah, he ended up becoming my biggest client up until COVID, actually. I mean, COVID changed a lot of things in my world. We'll talk about that. But probably for like 3 years, he was a significant client and a really, really good supportive friend. And we're still great friends. Yeah, and that would have never happened if I was being vocal about what I do. And a lot of people are just a little too shy about talking about what they do out loud with people.
yeah, and that is huge. If people don't know what you do, they're not going to hire you, and you're missing opportunity. So, okay, so go on. Me and you were talking about hockey before the podcast started, and we won't talk about the Bruins, but you can talk about your team. I love my Bruins, but they didn't do it this year. But Wayne Gretzky always said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take."
Yep.
And that's a great quote by one of the greatest hockey players of all time. And you might as well tell. I was at dinner with friends one time, and the dude told me how he spent an obscene amount of money on a website. And I'm like, "You spent how much on a website?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I needed it done in 30 days. I'm like, 30 days? I'm like, they should have done it in 3 days for that price.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Do you do websites?" I'm like, "Yeah, my company does websites." And I was like, I wasn't mad at him at all. I wanted to punch myself in the face because number 1, he got robbed. Number 2, I could have helped a friend. And number 3, I could have been paid to do it.
Right.
But so listen to Dustin, ladies and gentlemen. If people don't know what you do, you're not going to get hired. And then if you get upset because they go with somebody else, just look in the mirror. It's your fault.
Yep.
So
exactly.
So now you got these companies going, life's going good, but you're working a ton. If we didn't miss anything from there back, let's move from there to today.
Yeah. So I left engineering, like I said, early 2018. Life was pretty chill. I mean, I had these probably 4 or 5 marketing clients, few online, a lot of local. I was still doing engaged marriage, and it's always been kind of a consistent income stream and a creative outlet and a ministry. It is all those things. But so yeah, in 2018, I'm 6 months out from full-time engineering. I'm in a local, this is where Jerseyville comes back, but I'm in a local butcher shop here in our town in Edwardsville, Illinois. It's where the university is that I went to. And I'm in there with my wife. This is brand new shop. And I've always eat kind of keto, low carb. And I like meat and I like grilling and smoking meat and all that. So we're in there and we're buying some steaks, and then like there's this jerky, and I pick up the bag and it's a cool brand. Like, I'm going to buy this. And so get home, eat it. Like, this is like ridiculously tender and good. Like, where is this? What is this brand? And I flip it over and it says it's distributor manufactured in Jerseyville, Illinois. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, how could this be made in Jerseyville? So turns out I researched like the new company, that this Hanson Meat Company, this butcher shop, they're based in Jerseyville too. And I'm like, okay. So this same guy must be making both. It's a completely different brand. So through a high school friend, I got an introduction to this guy. So I'm like, I got to talk to this guy. And turns out he's a 3rd generation owner of this business. He's my age. It's a 60-year-old business. His grandpa started in Jerseyville. And one of the cool things about that is, as we got to know each other, this is something I realized only like last year. I was actually on a podcast and we were unpacking some of the stuff about my grandfather, and realized that they were both in the American Legion. They're both war veterans. They're both in the American Legion in the same color guard in Jerseyville. So like, it's 100% chance my dad or my grandpa and his grandpa drank beer and played cards probably in the same Legion. And we didn't know each other growing up at all, because he was like 2 grades different than me. And I never knew his grandpa personally, but they both, of course, passed on. But how cool is that? Like, so anyway, the reason this is relevant is because after this meeting, he hired me to do brick and mortar marketing for his butcher shop. And I thought that was the extent of it. The FireCreek thing barely came up, the new brand that I'm going to tell you about. But then in the second half of 2018, we were doing well. The marketing was working. And he said, look, I want to confide something in you. Like, I've got this jerky brand. I have partners in it. I really want to make it a snack stick brand, like change the format. It's way easier to make, shelf stable. He thinks there's a better market for it. At that time, it was a more unique product. I was like, I think that's a great idea. And he's like, well, we're breaking up as far as that partnership goes. And I'll pay you, whatever. And he goes, I want to bring this brand online, because he had been selling it in his local shops and golf courses and stuff. And he like literally built a hickory smokehouse in the back of his butcher shop. And he's like this product genius. I was like, I love the product. I'm happy to help you. So ultimately what I ended up doing was I built a Shopify store. I'd never done e-commerce before, but saw an opportunity. I'm like, yeah, I'll help you. And I'll do it for free, actually. And if it works, we'll work something out. Maybe give me a revenue share. We'll do something. I saw there's big potential, but I didn't want to make him feel at risk. So I was like, I got some free time compared to how I used to work. I got all kinds of time. So let me make this website. So I did, and built an email list, and we got some pretty quick traction with it. And we ultimately ended up in 2019, him and I traveled to 12 different trade shows throughout the United States. We got in a bunch of brick and mortar, hardware, golf, ultimately ended up in some Walmart stores. And it's a pretty cool story. But in the course of 2019, we got very close, and I'm now a partner in the business. So a big part of what I do today is this FireCreek Snacks brand. It's a better for you craft snack stick, protein snack. And we sell a lot online on our website. And then we also, have these wholesale relationships with other brick and mortar companies. So yeah, so that's a big part of what I do. The other big part of what I do is a company called Simple Success Coaching, which, like many of my stories, came out of the ether as a organic opportunity. So as I'm out talking about FireCreek, I should preface this by saying we did the whole trade show circuit, and we were doing quite well. We were in 55 Walmarts in our local region in March of 2020. And then COVID hit, and I also still had my marketing client with my dentist and my restaurant. And then COVID hit, and the dentist and restaurant could no longer pay me, because in our state they were shut down for like 8 weeks, and then had such a backlog of work they didn't need marketing. So that happened personally, and then all of our FireCreek momentum died because the Walmarts were closed. There was no foot traffic in there, and they certainly weren't pushing impulse food items at that point. They were pushing sanitizer and beer. but more so. So we had a pivotal moment in our FireCreek business. And what I decided to do from a marketing standpoint is I knew we had a really cool story. Ryan's story with the brand, his kids have food allergies, and it's like the way this brand came about was really special, and his family's heritage and all those things. So I was like, I had a loose friend who had a podcast. I'm like, I want to be on a podcast. I'm gonna tell this story, see if we can sell some snack sticks. I gave a coupon code, and lo and behold, we sold some snack sticks. It was like a couple $100, I think. And I was like, this is pretty cool. It was a lot better than spend money on Facebook ads and all the traditional e-commerce stuff. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole in 2020 and was on, I think, like a dozen shows, and it started building this crazy momentum of direct sales. But what I didn't expect and understand at the time was the relationships that spun out of that. Like all the people who heard me and heard our story, a lot of them would reach out, and we had a lot of influencers and brand collaborations and distributors, and like it really helped to grow the business. And the other thing that happened out of that was all these other e-commerce brands started contacting me and saying, hey, how'd you get on this podcast? Hey, how do you sell like this? Hey, can I pick your brain? We had marketing interns working for us for free that had heard me on podcasts. So this whole podcast thing grew out of the COVID change and became a whole nother business for me. So Simple Success Coaching is my business coaching business, and it's basically all online businesses. I don't do any of the local, I don't do any actual like implementation like I used to do, like running Facebook ads and doing all that stuff. It's all strategy, which is the part I really love and thrive on. And it's really centered on partnership marketing. One piece of that would be like podcast guesting. So I know that's a long story, but that kind of gets you from leaving engineering, having a hodgepodge of marketing clients and cutting my teeth. One of them became a business partner with this e-commerce company that I'm still heavily involved in. And then by marketing the e-commerce company, I created a whole business coaching company, which is now my primary, source of income and my true passion. Like I always say, someday we'll probably sell FireCreek. Who knows what else I'll end up, what other opportunities will come up, but I don't see myself ever not coaching people and doing strategy around business because I just love it. Like it's definitely my favorite thing to do now.
Yeah. And it's everything just built. You were moving, you were doing, you were trying things, you were willing to fail, you're ready to succeed. And it just kept building and growing. You're not done yet. You're still got plenty
Not
of
done.
years.
Yeah. Who knows where those dots lead, but it's really funny to look back because I sometimes joke, people are like, Dustin, introduce yourself. I'm like, well, I'm an engineer who does marriage ministry, sells meat sticks, and does business strategy, and it's like those things don't go together at all. But for me, because you've heard my whole story, you see they're all an evolution of the same thing. Like to me, they're all just it's applying my engineering mindset and systems thinking to new problems. So it could be a Shopify store. It could be helping someone grow their marketing agency. It could be helping someone sell cosmetics. It doesn't really matter. It's just the lens of strategy. And that's really what I've come to embrace.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. So let's do this. We're going to get into the just practical application, things that we're going to have you break down in steps for our listeners, some things that they can do to help themselves and their businesses grow.
Great.
But before we get there, between your birth and today, we're going to end the show with where are you today and where are you headed so we can help you get there. But is there anything we missed between your birth and today that's significant or you want to add in before we move into the question and answers?
I will say that I got rid of the shin splints. My treatment kit worked. I ultimately went on to run a marathon, a bunch of trail half marathons. That's become my thing, is like being out on trails and running half marathon distances. Done triathlons, and I've really re-embraced this outdoor stuff that I had as a kid. For the longest time, I was a suburban dad, and maybe we go out, take my kids out fishing a couple times a year, and camp once, twice a year, and that was fine. But now every chance I get, I'm out doing stuff. So like last fall, I went on a backpacking trip with some people from my church out to Wyoming and did a 5-day through hike out in the Wind River Range. And like, I've done a lot of like hiking, backpacking, whitewater rafting, so that I love that stuff now. So I guess for anyone listening who resonates with that, like my current lifestyle and what I do with my businesses has really enabled me to do a lot more of that. Like there was no margin in my life for so many years when I was trying to do everything, including engineering as a consulting full-time career. So that's really nice. Like I feel when I think about things I'm proud of, very first and foremost is my faith and my wife and then our kids. But the fact I've been able to reintroduce some recreation in my life, and particularly outdoors. And there's so many times, for whatever reason, I associate my dad with Cardinals. I don't know if it's the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team. I'm not sure why, but I often, it seems like every time I'm outside doing something, riding a bike, running, whatever, I encounter a Cardinal somewhere along the way. And it brings me peace because I feel like I'm doing what I should be doing and being outdoors. I like to do a lot of solo activities. It didn't really click to we're talking right now. That like that's exactly where my child, like that's where I found peace as a child. And I'm feeling a lot more at peace as a 40, almost 43-year-old man doing that again. I don't know how long I'll be able to do it physically at the level I do it right now, but yeah, that's a super important part of my life that we didn't really touch on. So
Yeah, no, I mean, and that is so huge because some people find joy and peace just reading a book on the beach, and some people want to be in the mud. Some
yeah,
people want to be skydiving. So it's all different, but it is interesting that the hero side of the relationship with your father and you said you were always outdoors, you were always hunting, you're always fishing with your grandfather. So there's definitely a connection there that brings you into that good place.
there is. Yeah, we have an annual trip that it's just within the state of Illinois. I started going with a small group of much older guys 15 years ago, but I bow hunt, but I really don't have a place to do it very frequently for white-tailed deer. And so we have this one weekend that's like the first weekend in November. It's kind of sacred time. The only time I ever missed it was actually when my grandfather passed away. And what's cool about it though now is I have my brother-in-law and my father-in-law come. They don't hunt, but they camp. So again, kind of that full circle thing of they're my new family, like they're and involving them in the outdoors in even a small way like that, because that's not something they really grew up doing a lot of. But it's pretty cool, pretty fulfilling. So I look forward to that weekend every year. And my wife doesn't complain when I go because I'm hanging out with her brother and her dad. So he keeps me out of trouble too.
Yeah, everybody's together or everybody's screwed. You got one or the other. All right, well, let's do this then. Let's start off. There's people listening and they're afraid to try something, or they're like, I don't have any good ideas. What's your advice to them?
So these are people who want like a business idea?
No, people who want more out of life. They're going to, they say over 70% of the workforce across the world hasn't found their purpose or passion. They're the walking dead. So you have people like, oh, well, Dustin has all these ideas and Dustin can do it. No, we're all the same. I mean, we have different roles and we have different places in life, but if you're thinking like you want more, you probably should act on it. So to those people, how would you encourage them? What would you say to them to get them moving and out of their rut to start at least trying something?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, depending on the personality, two tools, super practical tools that I use every day would be journaling and like long walks, right? Like I get all my best ideas on long walks. I can get them running, but it's a little intense. But I like to go on like a 45-minute jaunt, just a walk in silence, no earphones or anything, and I'll get some crazy ideas that come up, and I jot them down on my iPhone or whatever, right? So I don't lose them. So I think a lot of times a lot of us have great ideas, and a lot of us have things we're encountering that would foster good ideas, but we don't document them, and we don't give ourselves credit enough to think they have value. So I have like tons of these notes on my iPhone that are just like ideas. Like they may be an idea about one of my current businesses, something for a client, something I want to do with my wife or my kids, but like I try not to let these ideas escape. And I think we also lack ideas and clarity because we don't give ourselves space for it. So I'm amazed, honestly, at my own story and at how crazy busy and I was that I still had new ideas in spite of that. Now I feel like, I don't know if it's the maturity or what, but like I really have to give myself that space for those things to bubble up. And so I document ideas pretty feverishly, and then I process them in two different ways to like bring them to life and get further with it. So journaling is important to me. Most of my journaling is like gratitude stuff. So it's like, gratitude journal every morning, kind of sets the right tone, makes me centered on the good things in my life, not complaining, that sort of thing. Other people
And
journal
break, just so
ways.
if someone's listening, they don't know, gratitude journaling is that simple. You're writing down all the things you're grateful for.
Yeah, and just think of 3 things and write them down. They could be the same 3 things. It doesn't matter. But the idea is your mind wants to continue to focus on what it's focused on, right? Like you control ultimately your thoughts. And so what you focus on is what grows in a simple way. And so journaling before, early morning for me, or it could be at night, that's really helpful. One thing I've discovered in the past, I'd say 6 months, really, in this, the very long dialogue or monologues here on this interview will let people understand this. I'm a verbal processor, right? Like I'm a super introvert. I love talking to people and meeting people, but then I'm like so drained afterward that I just want to go home and lie in bed, because I give energy by interacting with people. I don't receive it very well, but blessing occurs. I'm very much a verbal processor. So I use an app called Voxer. I've got a couple of close friends that we just exchange these messages all day. Like it could be, hey man, I have a problem with this in my business. Can you give me some advice? Or for me, it could be, I feel stuck. Hey man, I just so you know, I lost a client today. I'm feeling down. And it's like, it might be these 2 or 3 minute little blurbs, or basically voicemails that you trade back and forth. Or obviously it could be a discussion with my wife, or it could be actually calling people. I do that too. But if you find that you develop your thoughts better in conversation, then you need to have conversations, right? And so I think a lot of people feel like there's only one, like, I need to be a writer. We don't, only if writing really helps you. I used to think I was much more of a writer in the early days of engaged marriage. And what I found now with my current business, I don't write anything. I can get so much more done by talking about it. And if it needs written, it can be transcribed, right? But like, that's how I process. So I think if someone feels stuck, they don't really feel like they have a lot of ideas, document the ideas you do have, talk to people you like, talk to people you trust about things that excite you. And then the whole Jim Rohn quote that we all hear every week is, you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with. It's ridiculously true. And I tried to resist it for a long time. So my businesses have exploded in the past couple of years, and it's not a coincidence that I've been in mastermind groups. I attend events with higher level people that I feel like I'm the dumbest person around in the room. Like that's when I grow. They challenge me. They change the way I think. So I think if you're out there and you want to improve in one area, the most direct thing to wrap up these thoughts is you probably need a coach, right? So you may need a business coach if you want to grow your business. You may need a life coach, a marriage coach. Fortunately, there are tons of coaches out there because the industry has exploded. Unfortunately, it can feel a little overwhelming, and some people aren't the best. So you get referrals and references, but having a coach can give you this structure, right? Like if I could spend half an hour with someone, I can really understand what their interests are, what their background is, some things they've overcome. And we could definitely come up with a business idea for them if that's what they want, and give them like action steps. Like you said numerous times today, David, ideas are great, but until you take some steps and action steps, they don't do anything. And so I think people get frustrated a lot of times. They're like, oh, I had that idea and so-and-so's over here making money with it or whatever. It's like, well, what did you do with the idea? Well, I didn't do anything. Well, don't complain. So
Yeah, exactly. And what Dustin said, you've heard me say this on the podcast. Dustin said a lot more tactfully, but if you're looking for a coach, reach out to Dustin if that's the kind of coaching you're looking for. Absolutely. But if you're starting from scratch, and whether you're going an online search or you're doing a, personal around town, if someone says we have hundreds of thousands of clients or thousands of clients, that's impossible. Those
yeah.
people are liars, because if you have a dozen clients that you're actively coaching and helping them grow your business, you're freaking busy.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, and Dustin, myself, anybody who does coaching knows how hard it is. You can only have so many clients. So if somebody says they have thousands, they're lying, or they're so bad at what they do, they have a client for the day and they get fired. I mean, I don't know how to say it nicer, but
they're counting every visitor to their website as a client, which is a ridiculous way to state your credentials, right?
It's a lie. Yeah. Yes. It's a lie. So anyways, now if you had a massive company and they have 4,000 consultants, and each one of those has their own client base and history, and they said combined, we have thousands of clients. Well, that's reasonable. But if you're out there looking and you're going to pay someone money, you want real results. You want people who are going to be doers and get things done. Like there's some people who are very famous and they've never done a damn thing in their life. Yep. I mean, really famous people who write books, who do seminars, who tell you how to do things. And never.
Coaches are the worst, right? Like the coaching industry, I should say, is the worst at that. Like my My tagline at Simple Success Coaching is like, I'm a business coach who's actually ran businesses, or who actually does run businesses, right? Like, and
Yeah,
I link
that's
to my
important.
businesses on there because it's such a differentiator. Many coaches have gotten trained on how to sell coaching, and that's their whole business, is coaching people on how to be coaches. And it's just like this incestuous cycle, but they don't have any actual experience or real world practicality to bring to people's lives. So they're kind of my enemy, I guess. When you think in marketing, I always say to have an enemy, and that's my enemy. Like, those things drive me crazy.
Yeah, and if you're listening, whether you're in Mozambique, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in the good old United States, when you are a doctor, if you are a restaurant, if you are a realtor, if you are a dentist, those are the things we mentioned today.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're the best at what you do if no one has heard about you.
Yeah.
And what the other side is that's really frustrating for talented people is there's people who are crappy at what they do, but they're great marketers, or they hire a
Yes.
great marketing agency and their business explodes. So now you're poor and bitter. So get someone like Dustin to help you grow your business. And I'm going to say it flat out. And Dustin, you tell me if I'm wrong, but typically physicians are the worst at marketing out of all your clients because their minds are so wired differently. That's what I've experienced. What have you experienced?
I agree. So whenever I was leaving engineering, my best friend, he's a business banker, and he basically just does loans for dentists, right? So
Mhm.
he tried to push me right into this dental network. I went to events with him, and I was very grateful for the whole thing. I tried to work with like 5 dentists, and I'm not anymore, right? Like, I had the one client who was my actual dentist who happened to have the right mindset for it,
Mhm.
but those other ones are super difficult. They don't think like, they don't think about marketing. They see everything as an expense, not an investment. And yeah, it's difficult. So I agree. I haven't worked with any doctors aside from dentists, but I would think a similar, I don't know if it's ego. I don't mean to paint too broad of a brush here, but I feel like what
Yeah,
you
no,
just said definitely feels right.
yeah, no. And looking at it, that's a huge key. Write that down. Unless you're driving, don't worry about investment. Worry about return on investment. It's
Yeah.
not don't think of things as an expense. I had a client, I was just trying to, they were partners, 2 great guys. One of the partners died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just not expected, right? So now the partner that's left is looking at the numbers like expenses. And I'm like, whoa, I'll never work with you again. This isn't me trying to get money. What I'm saying to you is make sure you're looking at return on investment. If you're spending $100 a month or 10,000 a month, but you're making
Doesn't
50,
matter.
giddy
Yeah.
up, keep putting
Right.
in that money.
Right. Right.
Don't worry about what you're spending if you're getting it back. But if people are taking your money and you're not seeing a return,
Yeah.
that's a big issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
And
what
I
I
spent
was
a lot of money personally on coaching and like kind of high ticket masterminds. So again, some of which have a very bad rap, but
yep.
I'm in another one that's just like been life changing, and like it's very expensive to be in, but the people that are there are super high quality, lots of great referrals, just the type of people I wanted to be around. And it's in my world, even now, I live in a nicer town, I live in a nice neighborhood. I can't find the 5 people to be around who understand what I do, who understand entrepreneurship, who think, who have aspirations like I do. All my friends in my neighborhood have 9 to 5 jobs and they're successful, and that's fine, but they don't get it, right? So
Yeah.
like, and if you feel that kind of isolation, doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur or a dentist or whatever, like, think about what you aspire to be, and then you got to go plug yourself into those worlds. That could just be through friendships if you're lucky enough for that. It could be through hiring a coach. If you can't afford any of that, it could be buying the right book and at least having a mentor through a book, as a starting point. But I found so many great shortcuts to success by investing in myself uncomfortably, but then doing it and then looking back 6 months or a year later and be like, that was the best decision I ever made. I'm scared as heck to do it at first. Yeah. So I totally agree with what you're saying there. If you can think about the return on the investment, not the raw numbers as an expense.
Yeah. And neither Dustin or myself were saying doctors are bad. They're amazing people. The doctors I've worked with were
Oh
fantastic at
yeah,
what they
for
did.
sure.
And they were fantastic humans. They just could not wrap their mind around the simple things that we did in marketing. Right.
Yes.
So the next question is digital marketing. Again, we went to, you can have the best widget in the world, but if nobody knows about it, you're not going to sell one. What are some tips you're talking to business owners right now? They have a website. What are just some low-hanging fruit tips that, hey, this is a starting point. If you just start seeing results, then we can talk and do more. What are some good digital marketing tips to help get your business ranking higher on Google, getting more attention, closing more deals, whatever you see fit?
Yeah, so this is great because when I do a strategy session with a business owner, I mean, one of the things I'm trying to unpack is for sure, what are their goals? What have they tried? What's worked? What hasn't worked so well? All those things are relevant. I really try to, so most people I work with are typically like solopreneurs. They have small teams, right? I'm not working with Fortune 500 companies. I like to work with the brand owner, and typically the brand owner, while they may hire a marketing agency, they're still the face and voice of the brand, and their brand has a personality. And like, I found the secret sauce. A lot of times you can cover a lot of those bases you just mentioned with either learning it yourself, like I did, and like you did, I'm sure at some point. SEO is like, I can build WordPress websites now, and I can write keyword oriented articles about a certain topic. And I would do that as like for my dentist, I would write articles about Invisalign and stuff, like and for local businesses, it's super easy to rank high. And you can do Facebook ads, you can hire people to do all that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What I've specialized in and how I've grown FireCreek and now my own coaching business is much more relational, because I found that that's how I perform better. Like that fits my personality, and it fits my brand's personalities. So a lot of people I work with are similar. So I mentioned earlier partnership marketing. And I think if we want to talk about that, I think we can unpack that a little bit. And
I actually have that.
Anyone listening that has a business will think of examples like, oh crap, yeah, I could do that. And none of this costs money generally. So yeah, so partnership marketing in a general sense, it's a term I call getting your brand in front of your target audience on someone else's platform. Okay. So that could be for a local business. Let's say you're a local digital marketing agency and you work with local tax accountants, right? Like a partnership marketing could look like you going to doing a lunch and learn in a mid-sized company who would be a great client for you, or maybe you do personal finance and all the individuals who work there would be great clients for you, and you go teach them something and you share your expertise and you give value with no expectation of return. You will get clients from that, right? Because you're leading with value. So every partnership marketing arrangement also is a win-win-win, because there's always a guest, a host, and an audience, right? So podcast guesting would be a super simple example, because anyone listening listens to podcasts. So I am not here. This is really to unpack my story and let people relate to hopefully some nugget of what I do. I'm not here to sell services. However, if I was, then this is an example of partnership marketing, right? The win for me would be exposure to people in my target audience. If there's people listening who need business coaching and really like the idea of partnership marketing, excuse the dog who's decided to bark at the delivery guy here.
It's all right.
So I'm gonna let him.
This episode's sponsored by FedEx.
It's sponsored by Handsome Hugo, which is our little dog that we got during the pandemic. But as I was starting to say, partnership marketing is a win-win-win, in the sense that, so a win for me would be brand exposure if I'm out here marketing to my people. A win for you as the host would be, hopefully I provide great value and it's a good episode and it helps grow your downloads. And obviously the win for your audience is they get some takeaway, they get these action items, they feel inspired, they hear a great story. So podcast guesting is one example. I talked about the local example. Another example would be like subscription box placements. That's been really big for FireCreek, where we'll donate or at cost give our product to a subscription box. That's a win for us because we get exposure to our target customers. It's a win for the subscription box owner because he gets product that he's selling through a subscription. And it's a win for his consumer because they find great new brands that they really enjoy. But like, just think about podcast guesting specifically. And if it's easier, I don't know, David, you want to throw out like an example of someone with a certain business or certain business idea, we can like strategize around how they could use partnership marketing to grow that. Otherwise I come up with ideas.
Let's do this. There are a lot of realtors out there.
Okay.
And the market out now is crazy. So I'm in Florida. So
Yeah.
Our economy is booming. I mean, they can't keep houses. They're needing houses because we have people from all over the country moving in because our economy is so strong.
Right.
But there's realtors who are struggling in other regions of the country. So let's talk to realtors, because there's a lot of them trying to grow their business. What advice do you have for them?
So if you're a realtor, one form of partnership marketing would be referrals, and this is not going to be new to realtors because they kind of live in that world, right? If you're not already doing this, then the obvious things would be like develop referral relationships with painters, contractors, home services type people, carpet cleaners, all these people who, whenever a house transaction happens, they're typically also involved in some form or fashion. So if someone's like, I'm going to put my house on the market, I'm going to come remodel my bathroom first, that person should be talking about their favorite realtor. Oh, you're going to list your house? That's why you're doing this? You got to talk to Sandy. Sandy's my best realtor I know. And then Sandy can make sure that when clients need a bathroom remodeled in exchange, before they list their house with her, you got to talk to Phil. Phil's the best, plumber in the region. So I think that's one thing, is to develop these peer-to-peer relationships for people in your industry. In the case of a realtor, it's a regional business, obviously, but you could do like a regional podcast. Sometimes people have regional podcasts, like, Tampa Bay, whatever, like news type of podcast, and they interview local people. So, local TV, local radio, local podcasts, where they can go on there and talk about their business. And I think for a realtor, if I was a realtor, I would really try to find some point of differentiation. Like, I would get super niche if I was a realtor. I would be like the military relocation specialist, or I would be like the blended family specialist or something, right? So like, I have a calling card that my name gets out there and passed around because I'm special, and not because I'm like just every other realtor. Like, I feel like there's a huge lack of that opportunity. Like for me, like, I do business coaching, but like, I really focus on people who value relationships and want to use partnership marketing. I didn't always do that. I started off very general. I worked with every type of client imaginable because I didn't really know who were my people. But I think if you've been a realtor for a while, getting a niche, getting a specialty, getting something you're really known for, makes you super attractive to those buyers, and it makes you super interesting to interview, right? Like, tell me, oh man, you're the military relocation specialist. Like, come on and talk. We're near an Air Force base. Come on and talk to us about the special challenges, some stories from that. What are some considerations? Like, how long should someone, when does it make sense to buy a house, like, based on how long you're stationed somewhere? Like, there's lots of interesting questions come up when you're a specialist. But if you're just like Joe Realtor, I mean, no one wants to talk to you. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Okay. So that's something that, again, and you don't have to be a realtor, but if you are a painter, it's the same concept. You're building relationships. And if you had one massive company with multiple business segments, you'd call it cross-selling. So basically, you're just cross-selling with your friends. So you're forming good relationships.
Like the same target market, right?
Same target market. So let's move then to people. So many people are at home, or they have a 9-to-5. They're kind of exhausted, but they're like, no, I got to get my own thing moving. I got to make this passive income everybody's talking about. What are some list building tips for people?
Okay. So for email list building,
because you, first off, talk about the important, because me and you know this, but for the people who are listening who are like, yeah, I had a list, or I use a list, or what's a big deal about a list? Lists are very important. Lists are gold. So Dustin's going to tell you about the importance of a list, and then how to grow your list.
Yeah, for sure. So email lists are super important. They're basically the only asset, the only customer base that you own. You can be very successful on TikTok or running Facebook ads or whatever, but all those things can go away overnight. They can change their algorithm. They always do. They always want more money for the same exposure. Your email list, though, is a database of people who have given you permission to communicate with them. And so they live with you. So I have an email list for Engaged Marriage, which is very important to that business. I have an email list for my coaching business. We have an email list for FireCreek Snacks. And by far and away, the most of our revenue comes from those email lists, especially for FireCreek and Engaged Marriage, because they're repetitious businesses, right? One's a membership site. FireCreek is like, it's reminding people to order more snacks. So we're all on the receiving end of emails, and maybe we find them annoying, but as a business owner, it is super important. So yeah, so like when I started working with Ryan with his brick and mortar butcher shops, he didn't have any email list. When I started working with my friend with the restaurant, they didn't have an email list. So what we came up with in those scenarios is a VIP club, right? So around the front and center of the website, when you're in the store now with like QR codes and stuff, it's giving someone an incentive to let you communicate with them. It could be as simple as the status of being a VIP, being the first to know about our specials, being the first to know about our truckload sales or whatever. It could be a discount off their first purchase. There's lots of ways to incentivize people to be on a list. Those are brick and mortar examples. Online, it's often depending on the type of business that you do. So for FireCreek Snacks, this is a simple coupon code. It could also be a free plus shipping type of offer where we give you 4 snack sticks for free. You just cover the shipping. And by virtue of doing that, you're now on our email list. So we're going to follow up with you and see which is your favorite flavor, and maybe ask you to get on a subscription for that flavor, etc. But so those are very simple examples. In information businesses like Engage Marriage, it's often like what we call a lead magnet. So it might just be a really tight key piece of information that provides a very powerful but quick transformation in your life. So for Engage Marriage, our top lead magnet is it's a communication. It's basically how to do reflective listening. It's like how to be a better communicator with your spouse in 15 minutes. And it's very effective. It doesn't take very long. It's just a little flip in mindset. So for Simple Success Coaching, I'm just going through examples from my own life. But Simple Success Coaching, we kind of have 2, depending on what level you're wanting to interact with us. So we have this partnership marketing blueprint, which is a free, quick video course that runs you through the framework of how to think about partnerships and how to like the examples we just went through, like how to strategize for your business through our framework. And that's free. That gets you on our email list. We also do free strategy sessions. So if you're really thinking, I do want coaching, you have to apply for these. It's not like everyone gets a strategy session, but if you're qualified and it seems like something that really makes sense for you, then I'll get on a call and we'll do a strategy session. So that's a much lower volume way to get emails, but everyone on there is super high quality, and they're a very powerful lead because they took the time to think about the offer, apply. They realize they're gonna have a 30-minute conversation with someone. So they're very serious, versus the blueprint is great for many people. Those people may buy a course or something in the future. They're probably not going to be a coaching client unless they get educated enough to realize that that's really a benefit to them. So I can go through examples all day.
No. I know
lead
it's
magnets, but is that helpful? So if you're sitting at home and you kind of have a side hustle, or you have an idea for a side hustle, one of the very best things you can do, especially if it's like a service or something, is to go sell one. Like literally go sell one. So if you're like, you know what, I think I could probably prepare taxes on the side, or you know what, I could probably do bookkeeping for people. Like it's different than what I do during the day, and it's something I do, for my wife's business or whatever. Cool. Like go on social media, like call your friends, text people and say, I'm going to do bookkeeping services for these types of businesses. Do you know anyone in your network that I could talk to? And sell one, like get money. And once you get money, then you have a valid idea, and then you could grow the business. What frustrates me a lot, and people come, I have this great idea for a business. Cool. Like, what have you done about it? This goes back to what we said earlier. What have you done about it? And it's really hard to truly validate a business idea until money has been exchanged. You can tell me all day you think it's a great idea, but until you pull out your wallet or give me your PayPal, and even if it's $5, the fact that there's a transaction changes. It makes it legit, like a validation of the business idea. So,
yeah, I agree. Question about the list and a question about growing the list.
yes.
Every industry is different, and you and I are talking about wildly vague and large generalities. So
yes.
Thank you for your patience, but I want to try to help the listeners hearing you and seeing your success kind of rethink and program their brain more like you to seize opportunity.
Yeah.
So email list, what do you see in most industries as a healthy but non-annoying amount of communication? Once a week, once a month, 5 times a day? I mean, for what you're seeing working out there, what's your opinion?
The honest answer is the more money you want to make, the more often you email people. And that's cliche but it's a stereotype for a reason. I don't do that. I just don't have the comfort or the bandwidth. It's like, I want my emails to be high quality. So we typically, for like Simple Success Coaching, again, it's a smaller list. It's a higher end service. I have less frequent communication with that list, but I'd say like every other week, I'm sending out like an in-depth email that really shows what I know, right? Whereas Engage Marriage on the other end of the spectrum is, that we sell digital courses, a $19 a month membership site. We sell books. Like it's It's more transactional. People come in, come out. They find us a lot in organic search. So we're sending emails typically like 3 days a week for that brand, but they're typically like links to a blog post, link to a resource. We're doing a flash sale today. So they're a lot less involved emails, but we do them more frequently. And I'd say FireCreek Snacks kind of falls right in the middle of that. It's a physical product. So we segment our list, which is really important for people when you get some maturity to it. So for FireCreek, for example, we speak very differently to subscribers versus one-off customers versus people who have never bought from us. If you've on our list and you've never bought from us, you're probably going to hear from us most frequently, because we really we're trying to compel you to try it. We're talking about our guarantee. We're talking about our different flavors. We're talking about the brand story, because we have to compel you to make a first purchase. In the middle bucket, you've purchased from us. We just want to make sure you liked it. We're going to ask for your feedback, for a review, for what, we'll give you a coupon so you can go try your next, choose your next, another flavor to try, or a sampler pack. And then the subscribers, we're trying not to annoy them. Like, they're already subscribed. They get it every month, but we'll still send them things on, do you want to change the frequency of your ordering? We have a great holiday special coming up, a gift box for your family and friends. We got a special for Father's Day. So those tend to be more event driven. So you can hear there's a kind of a wide variety of frequency for what I do with our own businesses. But I think if you're like kind of a basic email marketer, definitely more frequently than once a month. And I'd say once a week is a really good cadence for people. It's typically a comfortable cadence for people, is once a week. If you don't put a ton of pressure on yourself that like every email has to be life-changing, because it really doesn't. Like, you can have a 3-line email that really makes someone think, and follow it up with like an essay sort of thing, and all of those things are fine with people. It has a lot to do with your brand and what you sell, because what you sell is going to inform a lot about how you communicate about it.
And what have you seen now? So people have a website, people have an email list that integrates with their CRM. How do you bring that in front of virgin viewers? How do you bring that in front of people so they're exposed to your product or service, and then they convert?
Yeah, so there's basically inbound and outbound, right? So inbound would be things like search engine optimization, which means there's content on your site that people do a Google search, for example, and they end up on your site in an article. So what you have to do on site is be very visible that you have this thing that you're offering. So that's where the pop-ups come in, things that slide under. When they try to leave, it says, hey, don't leave, get this great resource. So that's like nurturing inbound traffic to get them to convert onto your email list. Outbound would be people who have never been to your website, but they're finding out about you on an external source. Typically what you want to do is direct them straight onto an email opt-in, like straight into your email list. Let them opt in your email first, and then they can go explore your site. Versus if they come on your site and they're like, oh, this is interesting, most of them, 90%, will probably never think of you again. Versus if they get on your email list, now you get to welcome them, nurture them, tell them about your story, and then you have this kind of permission. And at any time they can opt out, but you always have this permission to then communicate with them on a weekly basis, for example.
Excellent.
We can talk. I mean, the outbound is like more my specialty. Like I understand SEO and stuff, but like I teach people this whole partnership marketing, getting on podcasts, doing partnerships, brand collaborations, doing giveaways with other brands to grow your email list. Like, there's a lot of those kind of opportunities out there. Again, I tend to go to the free side, not because I'm against paid ads. Like, we use paid ads with FireCreek, but so our whole FireCreek thing is we built FireCreek to a 7-figure revenue before we ever paid for ads. So we built a foundation based on telling our story, and we have a huge retention rate with that brand and a lot of subscribers. It's a great product, but I think a lot of that has to do with many of the people that discovered us heard us on like a 45-minute interview telling our whole story. It's very different than finding something at the gas station. Yum, this is good. Like, you don't even know the name of it. Like, people are seeking out our brand because they like the story. And I think that's the power of partnerships. And there's like this implied authority too, because people trust you enough to let you come tell your story. Well, this guy must be legit, so I'm going to go try his stuff. And they honestly start to love the owners or the founders just as much as the actual product. And there's a lot of power in that.
Absolutely. And that was the last question I had for you for today. Not that I couldn't ask you 1,000, but the business owners out there are doing it all themselves, or the people are like, I'm going to start this. I'm finally going to take that first step in entrepreneurship. and they get this idea they have to do it all themselves. And you mentioned you're an expert at building collaboration and running with it and being very successful from it. So talk about ways that people can look at partnering and collaboration in a new light and some ideas for them to market their business through it.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously like hiring a partner. Like you can always hire an agency, hire a consultant to come in and maybe help you with the strategy or actually to run the stuff. Now, obviously that requires money. So if your business is already generating money, again, it's not an expense, it's a return on investment. So the fastest way to scale is to really hire experts to help you do the things that you're not an expert in yet. If you're more wanting to like be organic about this and grow your own skill set and maybe complement it with things that you don't have the bandwidth for, that's been more of my case in a lot of my businesses. I'll hire out very specific things. Like I know how to do SEO, but I have a SEO person who helps me with Engaged Marriage, writing articles, doing stuff on Pinterest, like stuff that he actually loves doing and I find annoying. But I've got enough of a business there it's easy for me to pay him because I know I'm getting that much and more back. It could be as extreme as finding a business partner. I typically stay away from partnerships, but I told you all about the one I have with FireCreek. A partnership is very much like a marriage when you're at that level. So we dated for a long time. We vetted each other out and we realized that we have similar values. We have a similar vision and we have very complementary skill sets, right? So Ryan is a wholesale product development fulfillment guy to his core. That's been his whole family business. I'm a direct to consumer out there doing partnerships and doing sales and marketing. And so that's a great partnership. So if you're someone who's like, you really do have a great idea, it's been validated, but you are the product person, you're the service provider. Like, so a lot of the people I work with are B2B service providers, right? So they're coaches, consultants, agencies, those sort of people. The music to my ears as a coach, and the moment I know I'm going to be a great fit for them is when they say, I'm really good at what I do, but I'm not good at marketing. It's like, perfect. So you're really good. And many of these people are marketers, ironically, right? So they may be like the best people ever at Facebook ads for food brands, but they don't know how to sell their own agency to get more food brands to come in the door. So then, it's hire you, hire me, hire a coach, hire someone. Again, it doesn't have to be an ongoing, like forever relationship, but sometimes it's like a lot of the people I work with one-on-one, it's like a 90-day engagement. So we'll strategize like, where are you stuck? What do you need help? And that could be directing them to resources that they do themselves. It could be partners, that they hire, or it could be skills they can go acquire easily on their own, but they have a 90-day plan to follow. And so my whole shtick is, let's do a consultation. I'll give you a 90-day plan to work on. That's all free. And then like, if you want to hire me, that's the coaching aspect. Like if you want me to help you with it, then that's coaching. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you what to do without the coaching. But there's a reason I do an application, because I can't have 1,000 people requesting, meetings all day. They have to be the right kind of client who I think could benefit from the coaching, clearly. But so there's a lot of different, all the way from true business partners to just collaborators to contractors. I have virtual assistants for each of my business that really help me offload a lot of the day-to-day task work so I can focus more on strategy. That's ultimately my goal, is to sit up here and think about strategy for each of my businesses and not physically be sending out the emails and doing the outreach for clients and all that kind of stuff. That's not to say I'm perfect at that. I continue to get better, which gives me more time to be outside visiting the Cardinals. But yeah, that's as I evolve as a businessman, what I find is the more stuff I can hire out, it's often much easier to hire it out than I expect. And once I do it, I'm like, why didn't I do that 2 years ago? So
yep. So if you're listening,
that's the reality we all face, I think.
Yeah, Dustin, once again, you're spot on. If Dustin's income is X dollars an hour and he's going to write an article, or he can pay someone a fraction of X to write that article to free him up to do something more profitable or something he just loves.
Yeah,
it makes sense. That's the return on investment. So thank you for bringing that up, Dustin.
And if someone's listening, they're like, how could I make money? And they're like, wait, I love to write articles. Like, why are these guys are crazy? I love to write articles. Well, then maybe that's your service, right? And you find the Dustins of the world. We spend 15 minutes a month talking, and it gives you 5 article ideas to write, and I pay you by article. Like that's how a lot of people start their businesses, is freelancing and the stuff that they think is fun, but other people think is super annoying. And that's 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 how you start businesses.
Yeah, like
There's opportunities like that everywhere.
exactly. I enjoy writing. I enjoy marketing. I love sales. But man, I want to break a bottle over my head if I have to get into the accounting. I hate it.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be simple accounting. It just stresses me out. So I'm like, I love my accountant. He's my friend,
I
and
know
he
we're
does
going
a
to
great
wrap
job.
up,
Huh?
but I wanted to point out in this vein, like all my kids have businesses. And so two of them do it together. He's probably going to be out of it now that he's like a senior. But my son and my youngest daughter, during COVID, like all the stuff happened during COVID, they wanted money. They were trapped in the house. They wanted to buy stuff online. I said, go walk around the neighborhood and come back and tell me like 3 problems that you could solve, right? And they came back with the dog poop cleaning up business and something else. And what they ultimately settled on was trash can cleaning. And it's perfect for them because they just do it in the summer. It's like every summer, everyone needs their trash cans cleaned again because they stink and they've got, stuff in them, and they're not afraid of getting dirty. And they make good money. They make $25 to do 2 cans. It takes them like 10 minutes. And so we have flyers, we have a Facebook group. And so that's like their summer money. They go out and clean trash cans in our neighborhood. And then my other daughter's very artistic, and she's like, well, how can I make money? I'm not getting, she said, well, I'm not touching that stuff. So she has developed a skill of like calligraphy and like hand lettering. And so she does throughout the year, but especially in the holidays, she does like custom gift tags. So a family will say, here's all our presents. These are from Santa, these are from grandma. And they're like super fancy, nice looking gifts. So my kids, I literally said, go find problems. And they said, well, these trash cans stink. And that was actually our trash can. There was like some nasty like meat or something in there that had went bad. And I was like, well, clean my trash can, I'll pay you. And they're like, we could do that for everybody, couldn't we? Like, yes, you could. So and then that turned into egress windows and flower beds and all kinds of stuff. But so that was a pretty proud dad moment when they realized they had a business idea on their hands.
And and that's I love it. It's so beautiful. You're teaching your kids this, whether they even realize it or not.
Yeah.
But I was with a gentleman today, dropping him off at the marina so he could pick up his boat. And I looked around and I'm looking at this marina packed, and they're building and constructing. And I'm like, obviously there's money in this business,
Yeah.
but the growth right now is exponential. And I looked at somebody pressure washing a boat. And I've had this idea multiple times. And this is one of the ideas you and I are talking about. You can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you don't act on it, you don't get it.
Yep.
I said, how hard is it to get your boat detailed? He's like, it's like, if you don't schedule ahead of time, there's a waiting list. He's like, people can't keep up. And he's like, they make good money. And I'm like, really? And so it confirms everything I'm saying. So I'm looking at a parking lot full of like 30 boats waiting to be detailed. And there's like 4 guys doing it. So
my neighbor across, like literally over my computer screen this morning, had a guy in his driveway detailing his car.
Yep.
And so the 4 corners are kind of like friends. So we're group text, like, what's going on? Who's this guy? And he's like, well, I talked to him after. And he said, when he comes back, he's going to come back every month and do my car. And if we want to just park all our cars over there, he'll give us a group discount. And I'm like, that guy's so smart. Like, most of his cost is the time driving to all his gigs.
Yep.
And if he get everyone to bring their cars to one spot, he can knock $10 off the price. We're all happy. He's happy. It's that whole win-win-win. It's like a partnership. And then we'll post about it in our neighborhood Facebook group. He could have his whole business just servicing our neighborhood because he's thinking about the opportunity to serve more than just one person at a time. So that's really cool that you had the boat detailing. I had the car detailing right in front of me today. So
both today. And what I'm saying is, the reason why I bring that up isn't talking about my personal life. It's just to say, even as adults, it's the same. Don't think it's just, oh, the kids are picking up cans or the kids are taking out trash. No, as adults, we see opportunity, and what are we going to do about it? And same thing with like pressure washing. I know a guy that does pressure washing. He wasn't even doing it full time. He was making $250 a year. $250,000 is good money in America, and probably in most countries. But he was just pressure washing, kept his mouth shut, sprayed a lot of houses when he went commercial, made a ton of money. So people would drive by in their Mercedes that they have a payment on, and look down on this guy.
Yeah. Look at this loser. Yeah.
And he has his truck paid for and his house. So do what you love, do what God calls you to do. So, all right, Dustin, where is Dustin today? Where are you heading? And how can we get a hold of you? If someone wants to reach out today?
Like I said, On the business front, FireCreekSnacks.com. It's only in the United States right now, but you can get the best tasting snacks, protein snacks out there. We got a 100% money back satisfaction guarantee on that. So if that's your thing, check that out. But for me personally, I spend most of my time working with ambitious clients at simplesuccesscoaching.com. So that kind of where I'm going. I've got courses, and I kind of help people wherever they're at. But it's evolved from one-on-one coaching. I still do a little bit of that, but it's mostly in masterminds now. So I've benefited greatly from being in masterminds. And a mastermind, for people who aren't familiar with what that is basically a collaboration of like-minded, ambitious people, right? So I've gathered 12 people typically in a group. We'll work together for 90 days and we'll implement this partnership marketing system in their business. These are typically online business owners, mission driven. They like to talk about their brand. They're passionate about what they do. And so that's where I spend most of my time, is running the mastermind groups there. I get tons of fulfillment from that. And that's really where I see the trajectory of the business continuing. But definitely, if anyone's interested in that business, it doesn't have to be because you want to be in a mastermind or whatever. Like I said, I've got other tools that I'm happy to help anyone. Definitely reach out though. So I'm super transparent. My email address is Dustin, DUSTIN, at simplesuccesscoaching.com. And you can also go to our website there. You're going to see a thing called strategy call up in the right. That would get you the application if you want to unpack some of the stuff with me. And then right next to that is a link for Partnership Marketing 101. That's that free blueprint that we talked about earlier, that you can get on my email list and receive all my emails. So yeah, David, good point. He just prompted me about coupon code. So yeah, for sure, for Fire, I don't have anything like that for Simple Success Coaching, but for FireCreek, if you actually did want to try some of our snacks, we'd love to have you. You can put Remarkable 15. Forgot to mention that earlier, but so that you'll go through and check out. It's a Shopify store. You get to the end, you'll see a thing for a coupon code or discount code. Put in Remarkable 15, and I'll give you 15% off your order. And we'd love to have you check out our products there.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm going to check them out myself. I love jerky. So I wish we should have talked a week ago, because I'm going on a trip and I'll be gone for 2 weeks. It's been nice to have some on the road.
Yeah, we get a lot of that this time of year. Well, how fast can I get them? We got a camping trip or an excursion. Yeah, I sell them, so I guess I'm biased, but they're legit the best type of from that category of products out there. I think they're hands down the best tasting, and they're super clean. So no allergens, no artificial ingredients, no MSG, no gluten. So we kind of took all the healthy stuff that people care about, and we have like a real hickory smoke process that it goes through, like the old fashioned way. And we really think it's the perfect marriage of healthiness and taste. So yeah, Remarkable 15, if the snack sticks caught your attention.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're working out or running, don't worry, check out the show notes. Everything Dustin and I talked about will be in the show notes, but reach out to Dustin. He's got a lot going on. Check back in a year. I mean, the way that our lives change, all of us, things move fast, but check in with Dustin. Again, if you need coaching or consulting, help him work out a strategy with you, get some tasty snacks.
Yeah.
And again, I'm spitballing this, but FireCreek, I'm assuming with the story, there's some Native American Indian in there. Is that where that name came from? Or
actually not? I actually have a lot of Native American in me, but the brand existed before I did, before I was involved with it, right? It was a FireCreek jerky, and then now it's FireCreek Snacks. There's not, the genesis is really Ryan loves camping, and it was like he was sitting out one night at a creek with a campfire, and he's like, FireCreek. And then there's actually a movie called FireCreek. We've of course found out through all our Google endeavors, and there's actually a coffee called FireCreek Coffee, but we're the only FireCreek Snacks.
All right. Well, see, I was wrong, but there you go. I just thought, like, I met one of my buddies. I don't want to say his name on air, but it was like very descriptive. It was his last name. Like, how'd you get that last name? It's like, because my great grandfather killed that many men. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. So my last name is Riechmann, which is like, it's German. Yeah. And I was actually on a call with a woman from Germany recently, and I kind of have researched enough to know what it was. She goes, "Oh, you're a smelly man." So it's like, we think of the word reek, like R-E-E-K. So I was likely my ancestors like sold fragrances like cologne in Germany. So I'm like the reek man. So it's pretty funny how you bring that up. That's how my last name came about as well.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of people's did. They just don't even know it. Have no idea. Well, listen, Dustin, you've had a remarkable journey. I'm really happy that we got to meet and talk. Thank you for sharing not just your life story, but so much business and marketing knowledge and just entrepreneurial like inspiration with our community. If you ever need anything, man, please reach out. And again, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I will do. It was a lot of fun. I obviously have a lot going on, a lot of different stories. So I know you like a long form podcast, so we provided that for your people. So I hope people find some value in all the different things that we covered today. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. And the more you listen to good content, not just this show, it's great. But like our slogan says, don't just listen, but do the good each day. Repeat it over and over again so you can have a great life in this world and more importantly, an eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This was our friend Dustin. Tell your friends and family, share the podcast. Again, not so any of us benefit, but so they benefit and grow, and we can all have just a better life together. So thanks again, Dustin. Have a great day, my friend.
You too, David. It was my pleasure. Have a great one.
You too. And to our listeners, we'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.